Okay, finishing up planned procurement management. Whew, what a ride so far. All right, tools and techniques now, beginning on page 472 and following the PMBOK guide. Expert judgment, there's data gathering. In this case, it's procurement. Think of, gosh, what are others willing to pay for these same services? So market research, you might have conferences, you might do online reviews. Then the next tool is data analysis. That's, in essence, a make or buy analysis. At the outputs of procurement, I'm going to have a make or buy decision. The difference is this in tools techniques is an analysis, make or buy, that goes with data analysis. I want to consider then the payback period, return on investment, internal rate of return, net present value, benefit cost analysis. We talked about those in lesson 1. Go there, review them. If those seem unfamiliar to you, I hope not. So that's data analysis. Now, there's source selection analysis. So besides what's the best price, data gathering, do I even need it, data analysis? Now I'm going to do source selection analysis. And I'm going to, am I going to do a procurement that is the least cost? I might lose some technical capability. What if I'm only going for qualifications only? I might do those might be best on a small value contract. What if I'm looking for quality-based and high-tech score? I want to negotiate the price after I find the tech solution. What if I want to go to sole source? There are lots of sources, but man, this is the one I want. What if I want the Microsoft label on my package that I'm trying to sell? This is the exception, but it's doable. And the buyer asks us for a specific seller for a proposal. We do this even in government contracting, which is supposed to be the most restrictive. Government contracting will say, the best contracts are open competition. True. But government federal acquisition regulations will also stipulate that certain contracts must also be open to what they call 8A category, a disenfranchised group. Native Alaskan American Indians is a term that's sometimes used, for example. And it says, look, if they want to compete, if somebody there competes for the contract, they're going to win regardless. So sole source sometimes is what happens. And fixed budget. And then there are meetings to finish out tools, more in the PMBOK guide. Then I'm moving to outputs. There are any number of outputs. And the number of inputs, tools, and techniques and outputs should indicate the complexity and the legal maneuverings of procurement management. Again, like any output, I'm going to have planned procurement management. It's going to be my procurement management plan, telling me how I'm going to conduct procurement. What types of bidding may be allowed? Is it going to be international competition or just local? The disenfranchised 8As that I just mentioned. What are the time, the metrics, the currency, the constraints, assumptions, etc. And I'm going to, as the output, make sure I catalog what is the company's procurement strategy for my product. Is it going to be commodity-driven, construction-driven, which would be price plus maybe experience? Is it services only? Like on Scott Force-based professional services can be very expensive. And then how it's going to be delivered to me. Okay? So if the procurement is based on cost, a bid, tender, or quote is generally used. If it's based on technical capability, a proposal. So you'll see request for proposal, then it's a technical capability that they're focusing on. If it's a request for bid or request for tender or RFQ, request for quotation, then you can say, the key is cost. Okay? We'll have bid documents, which we are putting together now, the statement of work, for example. You'll have your source selection criteria. So what are your requirements and how do you weight them? That's the source selection criteria. You'll form a matrix and score each proposal Before, in Tools and Techniques, I had a make or buy analysis. Now I have my make or buy decision log. Remember, before in Tools and Techniques, I did some data gathering like market research. Now I'm logging those independent cost estimates in my plan. Okay? And project document updates and OPA updates. Okay. Now, a couple of key terms you should be aware of. Procurement documents can include request for information, RFI, our IFB, invitation for bid, is also a procurement document. I can invite people to bid. A request for proposal is also a procurement document. Request for quotation, a procurement document. I just discussed those in the outputs of procurement management. So be aware that RFQ again is, we want to know about cost, where proposal is about that technical requirement. And so table 12-1 of the PMBOK guide, page 481, if you jump there, gives you a good comparison of procurement documentation needed. I recommend that for review. Okay. Now, before I move on, as you're establishing this contract, as you're establishing your procurement management plan, as you're forming this relationship with the procurement manager, you want to know general procurement terms. Because just like you need to know the language of project manager to be a great project manager, you need to make sure that you understand some of the language of procurement management so that you can have a conversation with the procurement manager. I have in the next few slides these boilerplate terms, these common terms that I have found through the years. I will tell you I've highlighted things that jumped out at me, but it doesn't mean any one is more important than the other. So incentives, I never really thought about it, but they are seller focused, where you, the buyer, are going to focus on what? Cost, performance, and schedule. What does that sound like? The performance measurement baseline. Yes, that's where you're making trade-offs to make your project work. In the iron triangle or the PMV. And so you cost, performance, or requirements, and schedule. So that makes sense. The target price. You want to compare the end price with the planned target. We did that in an example in the previous lesson under fixed price. A ceiling price, that's the highest that myself, the buyer, is willing to pay. A non-disclosure agreement. We can both sign it, saying that, look, if we have a conversation, and an NDA should be signed before you have a conversation with a company, other than a loose lunch. It ensures that whatever you share with the other company, they will not go share with others. It ensures confidentiality. You can create a win-win, perhaps, by doing a joint venture. What if it's a project, IT project? One company might be stellar in project management, the other company stellar in IT. You can join together, form a joint venture. There are special provisions in a contract, and more. Let's look at some more then on the following pages. Terms and conditions. Again, my highlights are only what jumped out at me, things I didn't know. But you would identify others. For example, an agent is just an authorized representative, helpful to know on the certification exam. A breach or default means any obligation that isn't met. And so if a seller can't, has a breach, your first item would be to discuss that breach. What if they had a large contract? You wouldn't stop the whole contract payment to them if they're meeting those. You can't do that, but you might assess just that one small area. Okay? So the response to a breach must always be to issue a letter formally notifying the other party of the breach or you could lose the right to sue later. Force majeure towards the bottom. I didn't know what that meant. It meant French. I don't do French. Love the wine. Don't do the words. Anyhow, it's an act of God, such as a freak storm or a fire. And it's usually resolved, because it's no fault of the seller, by generally upfront giving them more time to resolve it. Indemnification. I never knew what that meant. It means liability. Who's liable for injury, damage, or accidents? At risk is another term. Invoicing. I didn't realize I, as the project manager, would want to specify invoicing in my contract. Or what are liquidated damages? Those are damages for specific defaults that you've described in advance. What's a material breach? It's so large that it may not be possible to complete the work. Payments. When are payments made? What are the late fees? What are the reasons for non-payment? Retainage. I never heard of that term. It means that even though I'm paying you for the work you've done, I will retain as the buyer 5 to 10%, whatever's in the contract, of the payments until all the work is completed. Had no idea. Here's my favorite. Time is of the essence, meaning delivery dates are strictly binding. I would say to my procurement manager, if this work package had activities that were on the critical path of my schedule, I would mandate it that it be a time is of the essence, because legally I just bound them to delivery. That's going to cost me more, probably, but there it is. Letter of intent. That is an item that is not legally binding in contract management. I want to make that point. Privity just means contractual relationships. I had no idea. Non-competitive procurement. We just talked about one of those as an